Hey everybody, today we have another episode of the Making Strides podcast for you. Today we talk about road shoes versus trail shoes. What are the key differences and what is it that you need to know to take advantage of the specific technologies that each type of shoe is going to offer? We really hope you enjoy. Welcome to Making Strides, a podcast aimed at empowering and educating runners. Our goal is to help decipher misinformation in the running world that can lead runners off their path to progress. With an evidence-guided approach, this podcast aims to give runners the resources they need to foster healthy, lifelong running from track to trail. I'm AJ Cohen.
And I'm Adam Schwert. Let's make some strides.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Making Strides podcast. We got another great one for you here, and we're just going to be talking shoes again. We love shoes. I mean, what runner doesn't love shoes? So we're going to talk more about shoes. We're going to talk about road shoes and trail shoes and why, which one should you use? Do you need one of each, etc.? More than one of each. So yeah, Adam, how you been? How's it going?
Been all right. Feel like I've been busy running around. Trying to run mental stuff, trying to do stuff in the clinic, training. It's been wild.
I know. I feel like I don't have enough time for anything extracurricular wise either. I'm kind of in this good place though right now where I don't need to commit a huge time on the weekend for long runs. My long runs are kind of relatively short because I'm in this weird period of time where I'm racing like 3 times in 8 weeks, and so there's no reason to put in some crazy multi-hour effort on the trails. So that's nice, but yeah, I feel the same way for the most part. The baby takes a lot of my time too. That doesn't help.
Okay.
Cool. So why don't we talk a little bit about the difference between these shoes? I have some questions as well that I can bring up later on, maybe later in the episode, and because I think that we might actually answer some of these questions that have been asked on my Instagram in just talking about how these shoes are different. Okay, so why don't we start with like the outsole, and we maybe talk about the midsole, and we can talk about the upper, and then we can go into like just, I guess, take home messages. So, but really quick before we start that, why don't you just give your first thoughts on what is different about, give me two main differences of why a road shoe and a trail shoe are different. Go.
So this is a question I wouldn't say I get a lot, but I say this summer I get, maybe it's just because now I'm in Colorado and there's a lot more people that do trail and road or vice versa, whatever. I've had people ask me about, trail shoes for the trail and, do they need that specifically or using their trail shoes on the road, vice versa, which got me thinking, about this, that, maybe it'd be a good, episode to kind of tackle this topic. And the two biggest differences, I think, one is that a trail shoe is going to be heavier by design because it's going to be built a little bit more robustly to take a little more abuse on the trail. And the other, I think, is that it's going to have that rock plate in there that road shoes don't ever have to help protect against, really rocky terrain.
Yep. Yeah. So basically protection and weight, right? And part of that is, I guess, a lot of those a lot of the trail shoes just have extra features, I feel like, and those features add weight, right? But if there's something that's really important for a road runner, I feel like it's weight. So they're trying to just shave every single, 0.1 of an ounce possible, whereas trail runners may actually invest in some sort of technology to assist their trail running, right? So yeah, I mean, those are great points. I think that, those are like the main, those are the main differences. I don't know if I can even think of two separate ones. There's, the traction element, which Some road shoes have a baseline element of traction to them, but this traction is going to be significantly more important on trail shoes, certain types of trail shoes. So that'll be the one thing that's first thing I pick is traction, is how they're different. And then, what's another thing? How are they different? I mean, durability, you kind of mentioned that. Didn't you talk about that? I mean, yeah. So they got to be able to, you're going to be like kicking a lot more things, kicking up. I kind of said that. Anyway, just durability.
You know, so, some of them will have like Ultras. I mean, I'm probably most familiar with them because I wear them the most. But they have little parts to their shoe that allow you to throw a gaiter on there. So if you're on a really dusty, rocky terrain or whatever, help just protect the ankles or getting any debris in the shoe that could be, causing blisters or something.
Totally. Yep. Yeah, that would fit under the category of extra features, which, trail shoes have a lot. There's just a ton of extra features that trail shoes can have. So everything from like Gore-Tex to, gaitered clip-ons to, just tons of stuff, which we can get into a little bit. Let's start with talking about the outsole a little bit. So we already talked about traction a little bit. And we talked about, traction is the main thing with the outsole. Traction and durability. So we have typically like lugs on trail shoes, right? And then the only other difference in the outsole could be the type of rubber that is actually interfacing with the ground, right? So, I feel like, obviously there are different types of rubber, and we don't need to get super nitty-gritty technology-wise, but like the coefficient of friction is going to be different for like rocks and trail and stuff like that with a certain type of rubber as it is for asphalt and concrete, right? So, I feel like that's a big difference. And then the lugs play a huge role in a separate kind of conversation that we might get to as well, is can you run with trail shoes on the road, and vice versa? We'll get to that later, but like lugs, just think about how that rubber is going to wear when you're on a trail versus when you're running on flat surfaces or a road, right? And so I think that's something that we should we'll have to touch on that later, but that's just how those are different. Anything else with the outsole that you think that could be different? And then maybe you can take over midsole.
I don't think so. I mean, the lugs are the primary component there for a trail shoe versus a road. And kind of like you said, just, giving greater degree of traction on the terrains that might not be they have less friction, so to speak. The loose rock, the mud, snow, anything that gets kind of, some of the trails out here down in the Springs almost get kind of sandy at certain spots. So, having some more lugs would be beneficial there. It's just like having, mud tires on your car versus, a road tire.
Yep, totally. Cool. So tell us a little bit about the midsole. If you feel like you can confidently answer that, but because I'm kind of just springing it on you. But in terms of midsole, you've already talked about the rock plate. That's kind of part of the midsole. Yeah. So tell me a little bit how maybe a road shoe or a trail shoe might be different.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think largely they're pretty similar. They're meant to be relatively responsive, support and protect the foot a little bit. Maybe support's not the right word, but that's okay. That's a different rabbit hole.
Interject to the audience, I guess, whether support is necessary is controversial. And I do believe that trail shoes are made inherently with more support. If that's needed, is another question. But here's the thing is like not all trail shoes are created equal. There's a lot of different trail shoe companies that are doing different things. And so you may find a trail, maybe that means you find a trail shoe that doesn't add weight to a shoe by adding supportive features, right? Then you get to shave some weight because you don't necessarily need that support feature or technology, right? But that's a huge, factor for sure.
We've mentioned, the component of weight a lot here, and maybe it's worth mentioning, at least particularly for the performance aspect, or maybe even more so important in the road aspect where you don't need all these extra features, that once you go over that 440 grams per pair, that is going to negatively influence your economy while you run. So also something to consider, but not necessarily a deal breaker, because certainly, having a little bit heavier shoe in your rotation might almost be a training stimulus. I don't have a solid answer for that with some beautiful research behind me, just, something to think about.
Yeah, totally. And we can get into this probably pretty deeply if we wanted to, but a lot of it's speculation as well. Yes, we know that, after a certain weight, 440 grams, and a lot of people don't necessarily know what that translates to, but it's just barely under like a pound per pair is basically, if that negatively, in fact, is that right?
I want to say it's like around 7 ounces.
Well, it's per shoe.
Just so you translate it to like how shoes are usually presented to us, at least in the US, might be different elsewhere.
Yeah, so 440 grams is 15.5 ounces. So that's like a half an ounce under a pound. Sorry, half an ounce under a pound. Yeah, so just under a pound per pair. Yeah, for sure. So some of these features may actually, this is where a trail runner might be like, I'm okay with this extra weight because it means I have lugs that are going to allow me to ascend up a potentially slicker or steeper trail quicker because I get more grip and traction, right? And so there's just that's just one example. Or I can bomb downhill faster because even on like pokey rocks with the extra weight of a rock plate in my shoe, because I can comfortably like land more aggressively and propel myself more aggressively over this technical, jabby kind of, dangerous terrain or whatever, right? So, even though running economy might be a little bit less if we were to put this runner in a vacuum on a treadmill, but you know what I mean? But, a trail runner might actually sacrifice that weight for these other features. So,
but those other features would give them benefits that probably outweigh that extra weight.
Exactly. So that's where I think the creation of trail running shoes is just like, it can get super technical, and trail running is just so freaking variable that it really just depends on what you're planning on running on. That like, is it worth it to have these features? Midsole wise, I just think that, getting back to that, stiffness, rigidity, and stability, whatever you want to call it, like all that's going to be increased on a trail shoe, whether that's justified or not. And this isn't speaking to all trail shoes. Like I said, this is just like the standard trail shoe. There will be other trail shoes that fit outside, that are outliers, and will be doing their own thing. But there's extremes to everything. But yeah. And something I don't want to skip either is the foam. I think it's worth mentioning before we get up to the upper of the shoe and start talking about that the certain types of foam that's used in the shoe could potentially be different depending on, or if the shoe's a road shoe versus a trail shoe. And that kind of relates back to what we've already talked about with the weight and the durability and all that stuff, right? So, inherently a trail runner, especially a trail runner who's doing a lot of up and mainly downhill running, is going to have much more impact and compression on the foam. And so, trail shoe companies are going to probably invest in making a shoe slightly heavier to have a more durable foam in there so that you don't have to buy new trail shoes every 100 miles. Because we know that the foam can, basically compresses over time. So, that's just another thing. There's a lot of stuff in foam technology that we don't necessarily need to get into right now, but I don't know if you have anything else you want to mention.
No, it's good. Let's talk some upper.
Cool. What do you want to talk about?
Is it largely the same theme? I mean, it's a little bit more durable, because you might be scraping against a rock, you might scrape up against, some really stiff twigs, branches, whatever. A lot of trail shoes, or I don't know if I should say a lot, but there are quite a few out there that at least have a version of itself where it's, waterproof or has that Gore-Tex that you mentioned, help, keep it, a little bit drier. I think trail shoes generally drain better. Has that been your experience?
Yeah. I was waiting to see if you were going to talk about draining and breathability. But yeah, I mean, this is where trail shoes get really technical again because, okay, so first off, we need the shoe to be, shoes being breathable is great so that feet don't get necessarily super moist and sweaty, right? Because then, what's the recipe of a blister, right? We have friction, but the friction inherently is the main factor. But what makes friction worse and skin durability worse is moisture and heat. So, this is where it gets interesting because a road shoe, you want it to breathe. And they have way more ability to make that shoe breathable because they're not necessarily as concerned with certain other, factors that trail shoes need to be, we need to be concerned about with trail shoes. So, for example, a really breathable shoe is probably not super durable, right? So then, does a trail shoe sacrifice that? But a breathable shoe is also probably, depending on the material, it could be breathable, but it could absorb water. We don't want that. Trail running, we might run through, there might be river crossings, stream crossings, just wet environment in general. Yes, road runners can run in the rain and stuff, and then all that plays a role too, but it's just not necessarily something that's nobody buys a road running shoe because of its ability for you to run in the rain. You know what I mean? So, anyway, and then we have this other, what increases friction in between your toes and in between your foot and the sock and stuff is dust and dirt and stuff like that, right? And trust me, I've done plenty trail runs in dusty environments where my feet are completely dusted over and dirty under the sock. And that's because it all just infiltrates through the shoe and through the sock. And now, how do we take, this upper of the shoe and try and make it durable? It also has to make sure it's functioning to keep the foot secure in the footbed. It also needs to be breathable, and it also needs to be drainable and not absorbing water. And then it also needs to repel dust and dirt and stuff. And then sometimes you have these companies who try to throw a Gore-Tex layer on top of that where, now they're trying to make it somewhat waterproof, which usually you sacrifice the breathability and stuff. But, anyway, that's my rant about uppers.
I know you have a little more experience with the trail shoes, so I'll ask you this. Do they generally just drain through the upper, or are there any holes through the midsole and outsole?
There's usually no legit holes. It's
right, just real minor. It's I'm thinking of a track spike for the steeplechase. Sometimes spikes made specifically for the steeple will have some little holes in it to drain the water out.
Yeah. I don't think, not that I'm aware of.
I mean, it doesn't seem logical to put a hole in the bottom of your shoe on a trail where it's unpredictable, opposed to a track that's it couldn't be any more predictable.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I've just never seen that. And I don't know. I think this is like a funny side category, but what are some weird things, real quick, we don't have to spend too long on this, but like what are some weird things that you can get away with doing to one type of shoe, like a road shoe, but not to the other shoe? Or you can get away with doing to a trail shoe, but not to a road shoe?
I'm not sure. What are you getting something specifically?
Okay, so like with a trail shoe, you can, a lot of people, okay. Well, let's talk about a road shoe first, I guess. I've heard of many of folks shaving pieces of their shoe off. Okay? And I guess you could do that to a trail shoe, but you probably wouldn't want to, right? Like what are some other things like that? What about like drilling? Have you ever drilled like screws into your shoes?
No.
No? Oh man, dude, you're totally, yeah, just wait. You haven't spent a winter in Colorado yet, so, which I'm sure, obviously it's not going to be much different.
Why wouldn't you just get like yak tracks or something?
Okay, for some reason in the mountains, people like to take an old pair of trail shoes and they basically drill screws into the bottom of the shoe, and then they have studs basically.
Sounds dangerous.
Yeah, so you definitely have to
coming back up when you land into your foot.
Exactly, right? So you got to be careful with what you're doing. And I honestly think because of the rock plate, because of you using some common sense and not picking a long screw, more of a short screw, it actually ends up functioning fairly well. Anyway,
yeah.
Is there anything else? Well, okay, one more thing, just to give you an idea of the spectrum of thought that I'm thinking about for this question. Like, trail shoes, you can't really get away with wearing super loose and loosening up the laces and running, which I like to do with my road shoes. I kind of like, as long as I feel like there's not too much slippage in my foot, like heel slipping and stuff like that, I actually like my road shoes not too tight, and I wear them kind of loose, and I can get away with that. That's just another thing I was thinking about.
Gotcha.
Any ideas? No? Bad question. Okay.
Drawing a blank here. No. I mean, okay. The only thing I think of now is the picture that Chris has shared on the Runner Zone before with that guy with the Haglund's deformity, like cutting out the back of his shoe.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, is that what you're thinking of specifically?
Well,
could you not do that? I mean, I guess you could do it with the trail shoe, but maybe it wouldn't be a great idea in that environment. I don't know.
You could do it on any shoe, I guess.
Yeah.
So I asked on Instagram if people had questions. So what are here's the first one. We got like 4 or 5 or something. We'll go through them quick. What are some underrated features of trail shoes? Adam, why don't you give me one?
An underrated feature. Coming from my background, I am really not considering getting a trail shoe until I got out to Colorado. I would think the rock plate. I never really had the trails to where I would need a trail shoe back in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. At least with most of them, you could go find some technical ones if you wanted to drive a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really know about the rock plate and how big of a difference that can make on some of these trails that are out there. And until I went to Colorado, I'm just seeing how rocky it can be.
Oh yeah. Totally. If I had to say the most underrated trail shoe feature, so I don't know if there's a name for this, but the ability of the shoe to shed mud is, holy crap. If they could make a shoe that could shed mud, like no matter what kind of mud, just falls off, it doesn't really stick to the bottom of the shoe, in between the lugs and cake on like that, holy moly, I would spend $1 bazillion on that shoe. I have run so many freaking miles during ultras, I remember miles 55 to 60 of the Never Summer 100K. The last time I did it, it had rained it didn't rain on me, but it rained on the course ahead of me. And when I got to it, it was that perfect. Well, I guess it's not perfect, but it's the perfect consistency for that clingy mud where you just, every step you take, it adds a layer of mud until your shoe is like an extra 4 pounds. Holy crap. If there was a shoe that could just like, have that not happen, that'd be great. And because I'm a part of the Nike trail shoe testing team or whatever, they do ask me to comment on the shoe's like mud shedding ability, but I still, no matter what shoe they send me, they all suck at that. I don't know. What about overrated? Overrated features of shoes in general, besides motion control.
Overrated features. Can I say a carbon fiber plate?
Sure. Yeah. Of course. Yeah, that's a whole nother long topic. Yeah. We'll need many future shoe episodes. Overrated. What about that little flap on the back of your Ultra shoes? What the heck is that for?
I don't have that on mine.
Okay, so it's just the trail shoes.
Just when they're trail shoes.
What is that for?
I couldn't tell you.
Is that for like heel skidding down the steep trail like a Killian Jornet would?
Maybe.
Okay.
Kind of like put on the brakes on your roller skates.
Yes, exactly. Or if you're wearing Heelys, that's how you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, let's move on. Well, next question was, how do you know when your trail shoes are donezo?
Ooh.
Well, how would it be different?
Yeah, that's the real question, is how would it be different? I think people understand, with like a road shoe, it's really starting to wear in certain areas. The outsole just doesn't look very good. It looks really smooth. It's just not as responsive. It feels almost really stiff, not as cushy and comfortable feeling when you strike the ground. Mm-hmm. Would that be any different in a trail shoe?
Probably no. Probably about the same. I mean, I have some speculation and experience too, but so when you have a shoe, let's say you invest in a trail shoe with big lugs. The thing with big lugs is that they allow the shoe to wear really weird, and the amplitude of wearing can be much higher. So, for example, the Solomon Wildcross, or is that what they're called? Whatever. There's this like really rugged Solomon shoe. It's like their most like rugged. It's almost like, I think it's really popular with hikers too, because it's like this super rugged trail shoe. And I feel like the whole hiking and fast packing community is just moving towards these trail shoes anyway. But this is like that in between. And it's got these huge lugs on the bottom. And so it's for super technical terrain and etc. And a really good example is I actually had a buddy of mine who had these shoes and asked me if I thought he needed new shoes. And I looked at them and I literally took the shoe and saw how worn they were on the bottom, like irregularly, and put it on a flat surface, and it was like totally crooked and like wobbly. And because these lugs add for this material that can, it's just like this material that can erode away, it allows for the surface to become this really uneven, like, I don't know. So watch out for that if you have a lot of lugs. Another thing is, like, you may notice your wear patterns are different than your road shoes. So my wear patterns on my trail shoes are like right at my midfoot, like, or actually like the back of my forefoot, or front of my midfoot or whatever. And that's kind of where I contact when I'm going uphill. And I don't know if that's just when I'm creating the most friction when I'm climbing like that. But in comparison, my road shoes, I always, cause I'm a heel striker, rear foot striker, whatever you want to call it. And I land every stride with my, on the postolateral outside back of my heel, every single stride. And that's where all of my road shoes have the most wear. So, I mean, that you could pay attention to wear patterns and all that type of stuff and just general durability. trail shoes, you always have to worry about like ripping the upper open and that just opening up and your toes showing and whatnot. But other than that, comfort. Like seriously, whenever you're assessing your shoe life, just is it comfortable and enjoyable to wear still? If it is, then keep wearing it.
100%. Comfort is a good indicator.
Totally. Yep.
For new shoe, old shoe, doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, I've had shoes not even 200 miles in where I'm like, these are not comfortable anymore. I had Hoka Torrents actually, and they were so comfortable to start. And then I just felt like they significantly lost their comfort, over time. I don't know what that was. It was like, the upper and the foam underneath as well. The foam got more rigid, the upper got more rigid. I don't know what it was, but maybe it was all in my head, but it did significantly get less comfortable over time. And then there are shoes that actually get more comfortable over time. I don't know. It's just weird.
So along those lines, what do you think about like a break-in period for running shoes?
You're talking to somebody who has worn a brand new pair of Salomon Sense Pros literally for the first time running the Moab Trail Marathon, and everything went fine. I think shoes and break-in periods are kind of like blue jeans in the sense that like back in the day, we needed to break in blue jeans. And we needed to break in, we didn't, we're too young. But like, in blue jeans, a couple decades ago, people would need to break them in and like wash them a bunch of times. My dad used to say he used to wash his blue jeans a ton before he would even wear them, comfortably. And shoes would be the same way. I feel like, but the technology of both, like now we just buy a pair of blue jeans and they're super comfortable. Just right from the start. You buy a pair of shoes, they're probably, in most scenarios, the most comfortable right from the start. I don't know. I don't think there's necessarily anything structural going on with a break-in period, that's beneficial. But I do think that in terms of like this preliminary period of wearing a shoe, is it important? Yes, because you need to know how that shoe feels and how that fits and what's rubbing and what's, lace it down correctly, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think largely the same thing. I mean, it should be comfortable start to finish. Not really require much break-in.
Yeah, if you buy a shoe and you're like not super thrilled on how it feels, don't convince yourself that continuing to run in it's going to make it better.
I mean, maybe it does, but most likely if it's uncomfortable from your first run, it's going to be uncomfortable in your last run in them too.
Yeah. Okay. Should I get trail specific shoes to start trail running? Of course, everybody, I have a big trail and ultra crowd, so I guess all the questions are trail running shoe questions.
But I think that's fair. I think that's what people tend to know the least about, or think, they have to have that in order to run on the trail.
Yep.
Everybody knows road shoes and has access to them, and
yep.
Like even just thinking about the running stores here compared to in St. Louis, there aren't that many trail shoes in the store to begin with. But there's, I walked in the store here and there's like 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 types of trail shoes.
Yep.
In addition to their, 20 or 30 road shoes that you can get.
Totally.
So, I think it's a valid question for areas that aren't, have a ton of trails like we do out in Colorado or in other mountainous type areas.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you think?
Anyway, so the question to answer that was, should I get trail shoes to start trail running? Mm-hmm. Right. So just to start trail running, not necessarily. I think if you already have shoes, go for it. Just if that's something you end up really loving and want to stay there, then you can maybe invest in some trail shoes and spend some more time on the trails and such. But it's not a necessity by any means. I've run on countless trails and hiked as well, and my road shoes no real problems. That's not to say if I encountered some really wet terrain or something super technical that I wouldn't get into a little bit of trouble, or maybe not trouble, but it would be beneficial to have some trail specific shoes then. Absolutely. But just to start out, I don't think it's a necessity.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. Starting out, you don't even know if you're going to like trail running. Just take your shoes you have, go run on some trails, do it some more. You like it, do it some more. You like it after that, then, maybe consider getting some trail shoes if depending on what type of trails you're running on. There's this Pine Ridge natural area at the end of my road. It's that trail I run the most, probably. But it's basically just gravel, you don't need trail shoes for that. But if you're out running in on pretty technical trails, if there's lots of roots, if there's lots of, varying degrees of conditions across a run, right? So muddy versus sandy versus hard dirt versus rock. Out on the East Coast, I know there's a lot of kind of slabby kind of like on the Appalachian Trail, and a lot of those just trails in the Northeast. They have a lot of slabby kind of bedrocky kind of running. Out in Moab, Utah, right? You can do a whole freaking run on sandstone. It just depends on what are you running on. And I think that, you don't necessarily think of all these features that we've talked about that trail shoes have. Do you feel like there's utility there for you with the type of running that you're doing? And if there is, then get yourself a trail shoe. And heck, if you have the budget and you just want to get another pair of shoes or whatever, yeah, go for it. Whatever. It's not a big deal either way.
Yeah. What about the other way around? Wearing your trail shoes on the road.
Yeah. So we've talked about this a little bit. Because I do test shoes for Nike, I need a certain amount of mileage on these shoes. And in order to test them, sometimes they require 35 plus miles a week or whatever. And so, I have to wear them for some road running. And the fact that Pine Ridge I just talked about, I ran, if I run Pine Ridge and all the way around it and back, that's a 9-mile run, but 4 of those miles are on road. And so I'll just throw my trail shoes on but I already told you that trail, I could get away with wearing my road shoes for that run because it's just gravel. But, I usually wear my trail shoes and I'm usually just okay, running on the asphalt or concrete or whatever for 4 of those miles. Like I said, you have to be aware of how certain aspects of those shoes, like the big lugs, can wear down a little bit more. They can wear deeper, I think, than a road shoe potentially. But I don't think it's too big of a deal. But if all you do is primarily road running, you probably should not just run in trail shoes.
I think that's fair.
What do we got left? Let's see. What makes a good trail shoe? I think it just depends. I might cop out on that answer just for time's sake, and just tell this person who asked this question, if they're listening now, they probably got their answer by now in this episode.
Yeah, I think it would, whatever features allow it to be comfortable for you and do the things that you need it to do, it's a good shoe for you.
Exactly.
The specifics there are just going to depend on, what you need, and unfortunately we can't answer that.
Yep.
On a podcast.
Just try a bunch of shoes, see what you like. Last question was what was it again? Oh yeah. So the last question was trail versus road shoe fit. That was all it said. So take that one.
They should both be comfortable.
Yeah.
Trail shoes, and you kind of highlighted this earlier a little bit, or alluded to it, that you might want your trail shoe a little bit more snug. especially going downhill, or going down a tight switchback or something. You don't want your foot sliding around at all. But on a road shoe, I mean, you could get away with a little bit more, just because it's a little bit more linear of a path.
Yep, totally. Fit, always. We're looking for super comfortable. We're looking for a decent amount of toe space. Those toes should be able to display. I mean, it just needs to be comfortable. That's the main thing. I think the ability for the foot to slide mainly laterally in a trail shoe, needs to be, that needs to be controlled for sure. And that's usually done with the shape of the footbed and the upper. And so depending on the geometry of the rest of the shoe would affect that too. But mainly, like, we do not want, the geometry of the rest of the shoe would so I'm thinking lateral ankle rolls, right? Super, super common in trail running. Okay. What creates a lateral ankle roll in a trail runner? We have this, typically, you're landing in that inverted position, or you hit something that jerks you into that inverted plantar flex position, and then the ankle will roll. But what contributes to that in a shoe is, and I'm speaking from experience, is if you have a shoe that you're sliding laterally on the footbed, or you're sliding laterally on the footbed against the upper of the shoe because it's allowing you to, your center of mass of your foot is going to go laterally over your base of support, and you're going to turn your shoe. Depending on the shape of the shoe, the geometry of underneath your foot, it may prevent some of that. And so that's key. But also the upper should be able to securely, and how you're, the upper, including how you're lacing your shoes, should securely keep your foot in the footbed and minimize that motion, because it's like this slippery slope. As soon as you slide a little bit, your center of mass goes, and then your everters, your peroneals are not strong enough to recover from that. And you tip and you roll. And, so anybody who's got those, okay, so like 9 out of the 10 trail runners listening right now that frequently roll their ankle can think about that a little bit from here on out. So that's fit. I think that was it. Anything else?
No, I think that was good. I think we covered all the high points, at least ones we're aware of. And, if anybody has any further specific questions, feel free to reach out, email us, do the little voice thing that's on our websites now.
Yeah, you can record a question and send it. Mm-hmm. So real quick to finish, just what's your road shoe? What's your trail shoe right now?
Road shoe is the Ultra Instinct, primarily, and then I have what is it? It's a new one for me that I got this spring. It's a New Balance, I think the 880s. It was previously a Brooks Glycerin.
Cool.
No real reason to switch, just trying other things out. And trail shoes I yet have to invest it in, but it will be most likely an Ultra Lone Peak.
Yep.
Would be my guess.
Yeah, I might get those eventually too. Yeah, for me right now I'm in, so road shoes, I'm kind of in limbo between potentially retiring soon. My Solomon Sense, Solomon Predict RA shoe, which I love. And then my Solomon, what is that? God, why am I blanking on there? Okay, I will come back to that. Okay, and then my Nike, I'm actually in a Nike tester program right now, testing some Terra Kygers. Those are my favorite Nike trail shoe, Nike Terra Kygers. But once that ends, I'm going to be running my Wild Horses again, my Nike Wild Horses. Sonic, that's what I was thinking. Okay, so I'm about to also retire my Salomon Sonic 3 Balance. And those are the ones that potentially reduce vibration. But you know what? They kind of pinch the forefoot, and I don't like them a whole ton. They're not super comfortable. and they're a little rigid for me, and I have like 340 miles on them. I think I'm just going to retire them. Anyway, cool. Anything else, Adam?
That's it.
Cool. Love talking shoes. And cool. We'll have all of our contact info in the show notes. And send us a question via email or via our little voice recorder. Okay. See you guys. Go make some strides. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick minute here at the end to thank you for taking the time to listen to our podcast all the way to the end. If you learned anything from us today, or if you see the value in this podcast, please take a second to share your favorite episode on social media. Another way to show your support is to give us a review on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you're using. If you have any questions about anything you heard, please feel free to reach out to either of us via any of our social media channels. All of the information with how to connect with us, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, our websites, email, all that information will be listed at the bottom of the show notes. Lastly, as a thank you for your support, for anyone who mentions this podcast, you can receive $10 off any service to work with either Adam at Run Mental or me at Up and Running PT. First-time clients only. Okay, guys, have a great day.